I want to tell you about the exact moment I understood I was poor, not broke. I'd been broke before and clawed back. Poor. It was a Tuesday in a grocery store on the south side of Milwaukee, and I was 67 years old, standing in the meat aisle with a package of pork chops in my hand, doing the arithmetic in my head the way I'd done arithmetic my whole life. And the arithmetic said, if you buy these chops, you're short on the heart pills this month. And I stood there, a grown man who'd worked 40 years with his hands, and I put the pork chops back on the shelf, real quiet so nobody would see. And I walked out to my truck and I sat there in the cold and I thought, Ron, this is it. This is what the end of the road looks like for a man like you. That was about a year and a half ago. And I'm sitting here right now on a little balcony in a neighborhood called Grajaú, up in the north part of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And this morning I walked down to the open-air market and I filled 2 shopping bags, fresh fish, a whole mess of vegetables, fruit that still smells like the tree, for about the price of those pork chops I couldn't buy. And I live down here on the same $1,400 a month that made me poor in Milwaukee. Same check, same man. And here I am not poor. Here I'm something close to comfortable. So today I'm going to tell you exactly, and I mean exactly down to the dollar, how that math works, and I'm going to tell you the parts nobody puts in the cheerful little videos, the parts that'll actually decide whether you make it down here or go home broke and embarrassed. So stay with me to the end because the money is only half the story, and the other half is the half that matters. But let me back up because you can't understand the math unless you understand the man. My name's Ron Kowalczyk. Yeah, it's Polish, Southside Milwaukee. My grandfather came over with nothing and worked in the tanneries. I spent 40 years as a machinist, tool and die mostly. You probably don't know what that is, so let me tell you, I made the parts that make the parts. The precise stuff, measured to a couple 10,000ths of an inch, the tooling that other machines run on. It's careful, exacting work, and I was good at it, and I was proud of it. Wisconsin, factory town, you got a job, and you did it right, and you didn't complain. I did that for 40 years, and my hands are half arthritis now to prove it. I got married young, to Carol, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't an easy man to be married to. I was quiet. I worked a lot of overtime, and I kept most of what I felt locked up in a box I never learned how to open. We had a daughter, Katie, and Carol and I, we split up about 20 years ago. No big war. We just wore each other out, and she wanted more than a tired man who came home smelling like cutting oil. And a divorce in your late 40s when you're a working man means you split what little there is right down the middle and you start over from about zero. Katie's grown now, out in Seattle, and we talk on the holidays, and she's kind to me, but there's a distance there I built myself, one missed recital at a time, and I don't tell you that to fish for sympathy. I tell you because a lot of us working men end up alone at the end for reasons we built with our own 2 hands, and if that's you listening to this, I want you to hear that it is not too late to build something different. I thought it was too late. I figured a quiet, closed-up man in his late 60s had used up all his chances at anything but sitting alone. I was wrong about that. Same as I was wrong about the money. So by the time I retired at 66, I was a single man in a rented half of a duplex on the south side with a Social Security check of about $1,400 a month and not a whole lot behind it. And here's what nobody tells you about being old and poor in America. It's not dramatic. It's just a slow, quiet squeeze. It's turning the heat down to 58 in a Wisconsin January and wearing a coat in your own kitchen. It's the pills or the pork chops. It's not answering the phone because you think it might be a bill. It's the light going out of your days so slow you don't even notice it happening. On paper, I wasn't starving, but I was shrinking. And there's no line item on a bank statement for a man's dignity draining out of him a little at a time. And here's the part that stung the worst. For a man who spent his whole life being precise and useful, I had done everything they told me to do. 40 years of work, never took a handout, paid my taxes, saved what a machinist's wage let me save, which wasn't much, not after a divorce. I followed the blueprint exactly to the letter, and the blueprint was wrong. It turned out you could do every single thing right and still end up 67 years old, choosing between your supper and your heart medicine in the richest country on the face of the earth. That's a bitter thing for a careful man to sit with, that the measurements were off from the very start, and nobody ever told you. And I think that's really the thing that finally got me on the plane. Not adventure. I'm not an adventure man, never was. I got on the plane because I finally understood that staying was the real gamble, and leaving only looked like one. So, how does a tool and die man from Milwaukee end up on a balcony in Rio? I'll tell you. And it started, like a lot of things do now, at 2 in the morning with a screen. I couldn't sleep. You don't when you're doing math about the rest of your life. And I started watching videos about retiring cheap overseas. And a lot of it was baloney, guys selling a fantasy. But I'm a numbers man. Tool and die, remember? And when I actually ran the numbers on a few of these places, one of them kept coming out different, and that was Brazil, that was Rio. And I want to be honest about my first mistake because it's the mistake damn near every American makes, and it'll cost you if you don't catch it. I thought I was buying the same life, cheaper. I thought, I'll take my $1,400 somewhere warm, and it'll go further, and I'll be a poor man in a nicer climate. That is not what happened. And that's the first thing I need you to understand, so write it down. Rio is not a cheaper version of America. It is a completely different way of living. And if you come down here trying to run your American life on discount, you will fail, and you'll fail expensive. The men I've watched wash out down here, and I've watched a few, every one of them came trying to buy Milwaukee with palm trees. It doesn't work. What actually works is something else entirely, and I had to learn it, and I'm going to teach it to you. But let me tell you about landing first, because it about turned me around at the gate. You come into Rio at night, and the heat hits you the second you step off that plane. A wet, heavy heat that a Wisconsin man has simply never felt comes right through your clothes. And the drive in from the airport runs alongside the big communities on the hills, the favelas, all lit up in the dark, and motorbikes buzzing between the cars, and a language coming at you from every direction that you can't understand one word of. And I sat in the back of that taxi, 68 years old, everything I still owned in 2 suitcases, and I thought, Ron, you precise, careful, measure twice, cut once man, you have just made the least careful decision of your entire life. I'd rented a little place up in Grajaú. Not the beach, not the postcard. A quiet, leafy neighborhood up north where regular Cariocas live, near the big forest. And those first couple weeks, I was as lonesome and lost as I've ever been. Couldn't read a menu. Couldn't ask for directions, rode the bus the wrong way more than once. And then a little thing cracked it open, the way a little thing always does. There's a padaria, a bakery, on my corner, and the fella who runs it, Marcon, a big cheerful guy with flour on his apron, watched me come in every morning pointing at things like I'd lost my voice. And one morning he just came around the counter, put a hand on my shoulder, and walked me down the case, naming everything slow, making me say it back. Pão, café, manteiga, laughing the whole time, not at me, with me. He didn't have to do that for some lost old gringo who couldn't order bread. But that's the thing about this place I still can't get over. Back in Milwaukee, I'd lived next to the same people for years and never once learned their names. 2 weeks in Grajaú, and the baker was teaching me his language by hand, for free, for nothing, just to be kind. That was the first morning I thought that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't made the worst mistake of my life. But here's the first thing I need every American to hear, because the news back home only ever shows you one Rio. That Rio, the crime, the danger, it's real, and I'll talk about it straight later because I won't lie to you about your safety. But it is one Rio, and it is not the whole city. Any more than the worst corner of Milwaukee is the whole of Milwaukee. The Rio I actually live in is regular working people getting up in the dark, packing onto a bus, raising their kids, looking out for their neighbors. And the day I stopped bracing for a mugging on every corner and actually started looking at the people around me, the whole place changed shape. Now, let me do what I came here to do, which is show you the actual money down to the dollar because I'm a machinist and I don't deal in vague. Let me break my month down for you. My rent. I've got a one-bedroom apartment in Grajaú, a real apartment, tile floors, a little balcony, in a safe, regular building where working families live. After the exchange rate, it runs me right around a third of my check. A third. In Milwaukee, my half of a duplex was eating well over half my check and climbing every year. So right there, on the biggest expense a person's got, I'm keeping money in my pocket every single month that I never saw back home. My food. This is where it gets almost silly. I shop the feira, the open-air street market that sets up in the neighborhood a couple times a week, and I eat better than I have in 20 years for a fraction of what I paid. Fresh fish the fishermen brought in that morning. Vegetables and fruit picked ripe, piled up, a couple bucks for a bag of it. When I want a hot lunch, I go to a por kilo place where you pay by the weight of your plate. You load up rice, beans, a piece of meat, salad, and a big plate runs me around $6 and I walk out full. A strong little coffee and a hot buttered roll at the corner bar in the morning, $1, and a half. I eat like a king down here, and I mean that. And my whole food bill for a month is less than what a couple weeks of careful shopping cost me in Wisconsin. The rest of it. The bus and the metro are cheap, and at my age, there's a senior fare that's almost free. I gave up needing a car and a car payment and insurance and gas, and that alone is a raise. A haircut's a few bucks. The neighborhood gym is next to nothing. A man to fix something for you, a few dollars for an afternoon. My phone's a few dollars a month. And here's the one that changed my life, my health care, and I'll get deep into that later. But I carry a private plan down here that costs me less than my copays alone used to cost in America. So when you stack it all up, rent a third of my check, food almost nothing, transport almost nothing, a real doctor I can actually afford, I end the month with money left over. Me. The pills are pork chops, man. I've got a cushion now for the first time in 15 years. Let me give you a picture of what that actually feels like, because a number on a page never lands the way a morning does. Last Saturday, I walked down to the feira with a little folding cart, and I bought a whole fish, a kilo of shrimp, mangoes, tomatoes still warm from the sun, a bag of greens, and a pineapple the man cut and cleaned for me right there while we talked. And I pushed that cart home full, for about what a sad little supermarket dinner for one cost me back in Milwaukee, and I stood in my kitchen putting it all away, and I laughed out loud alone, like a crazy person, because I remembered those pork chops. I remembered putting them back on the shelf so nobody would see. And here I was with a cart full of the best food I'd eaten in years and money still in my pocket. But now here's the other side, and I need you to hear it just as loud, because this is the part the fantasy sellers skip. Everything I just told you is cheap because it's local. The second you reach for anything imported, the price flips hard the other way, sometimes double what you'd pay in the States, because the import taxes in this country are brutal. You want American brands, your particular peanut butter, electronics, a car, you will bleed for it. A regular car costs more here than it does in Wisconsin. I'm not exaggerating. So the math only works one way. You've got to actually live like you're in Rio. You eat what the locals eat, you buy what the locals buy, you take the bus. The men who come down here and insist on importing their American life spend American money and end up broke and bitter in the same city where I'm comfortable on 1400. Same exchange rate, completely different outcome. Rio doesn't make you rich or poor. It just shows you fast exactly who you are with a dollar in your hand. And while we're talking dollars, let me give you the nuts and bolts nobody explains until you're stuck. Getting your American money into your Brazilian hand has teeth in it. The ATMs down here have daily limits lower than you'd expect, and they charge you a fee on this end while your bank charges another on that end, so you learn to pull the max less often. There's a national tax on a lot of foreign card transactions. They call it the IOF, and it adds up if you're not paying attention. So write this down, machinist's orders. Before you ever get on that plane, call your bank and tell them you're moving to Brazil, or the first time you pull cash, the machine gets flagged as fraud and freezes your only card, and now you're an old man 5,000 miles from your money on a weekend with no way to reach a human. Carry 2 cards from 2 different banks. Set up one of the proper transfer services for the bigger money. They give you a fair rate, not the gouging a bank wire does. And keep real cash at the house, more than you think you need because the power goes out down here. And when it does, the card machines go dark, and paper money is the only thing that buys you supper, and that dollar-to-real exchange rate becomes a living thing in your life. Some months it swings your way and you feel flush. Some months it swings against you and your grocery money quietly shrinks overnight. So don't ever budget right to the edge. Leave yourself room for the number to move. Now let me get into the stuff the money can't prepare you for, because the daily life down here is a whole different animal, and the first one that whipped me was the heat and the clock. I'm a Wisconsin man. I know cold. I do not know this. This is a wet heat that sits on you most of the year and has you through 2 shirts before lunch. My first months I fought it, kept my Milwaukee schedule, ran my errands at noon, pushed through like a good worker, and I was wrung out and foggy all the time and couldn't figure why. And an old Canadian fella named Gord, been down here 20 years, set me straight over a cold beer. He said, "Ron, you're running on factory time in a tropical city. Look around and nobody's out in this sun at noon. There's a reason for that." And he was right. You do your living early, in the cool of the morning. Midday, you slow down, you find shade, you eat, you rest. And the whole city comes back to life in the evening. Everybody out on the sidewalk talking late. I had to throw out 40 years of clock punching, and once I did, the strangest thing happened. I felt younger. That schedule's built for a body, not a factory. And there's what they call the Brazilian hour. A man says 2 o'clock, he means somewhere in the afternoon, more or less. For a tool and die man who measured his whole life to the 10,000th, this liked to drive me insane. But I had it backwards. They're not disrespecting time. They're respecting the person in front of them more than the clock. I learned to carry a book and quit packing my days so tight, and I learned the 2 words that save your sanity down here. Calma and vai dar tudo certo. Easy, it'll all work out, and mostly it does. Now I promised I'd talk straight about safety because it's what everybody back home is scared of for me. And I won't wave it off. The truth, held in both hands. Rio has real crime, and you respect it the way you'd respect a running lathe. Respect, not panic, because panic gets you hurt. And also, most days, for most people, in most places, nothing happens because millions of ordinary folks live their whole lives here just fine. Both are true. So you use your head. You don't flash what you've got. No watch worth stealing. No fancy phone out on a quiet street. I dress plain, like the working man I am. You learn the city block by block because there are streets fine at noon you don't walk at night. And the locals know exactly which, so you ask and you listen. You carry a cheap second phone and a little give-up money, and if it ever happens, you hand it over, no argument, because nothing in your pocket is worth your life. And the favelas, the hillside communities, they are not the monster the news made in your head. Real families, good people, some of the warmest in the city. And yes, some are run by people you don't want to meet, so you don't go wandering in as a tourist with a camera. The single biggest thing that made me safer was learning to carry myself like I belonged and getting known on my own street. That web of neighbors is worth more than any lock. And I'll tell you the thing that surprised a suspicious old machinist the most. On my street now, people look out for me. The lady at the corner store, the guys at the Boteco, Marcon at the bakery, the kid who fixes phones. They know me and they notice when I'm not around. Back in Milwaukee, I could have dropped dead in that duplex and gone a week before anybody knocked. Here, if I miss 2 mornings at the bakery, somebody comes looking for me. That is not a security system you can buy. That is the kind of safety that only comes from being a real person on a real street where people know your name. And it's worth more than every bar and steel lock I had on that house back home. Then there's the paperwork, and I need you to pay attention here because folks wave this off, and it's the part that can actually get you sent home. You come in on a tourist stamp, 90 days, stretch it toward 180 in a year, and plenty of guys just live like that, running to the border to reset it. But the thing you need from day one is a CPF, the taxpayer number. Without it, you can't rent right, can't get a real phone plan, can't hardly function. Get it early, and if you mean to stay, look hard at the proper retirement visa. Brazil has one for retirees who can show steady income landing every month, which is exactly what a Social Security check is, and it ends the border runs for good. The federal police office will test your soul. You take a number. You sit under a fan just pushing hot air, and the list of what they want is the start of the conversation, not the end. But getting angry is the single dumbest thing you can do, because that clerk holds your whole life in Brazil in her hands, and she's got all day, and you don't. Show up early, every paper in triplicate, dress decent, be kind. In this country, your attitude is your currency, and a patient man on a small check gets further than a rich man who's rude. And the health care, because this is the big one, and I promised I'd come back to it. Hear me, there is no Medicare down here. Your U.S. insurance does just about nothing for you in Brazil, but Brazil has a public system, the SUS, and it's free even to you, a foreigner, and in a true emergency, it will treat you, and there are good, dedicated people in it. It's just stretched thin, and the lines can be long. So most of us who can swing it carry a private plan, a plano de saúde. And here's the number that still knocks me over. My private plan down here costs me less every month than just the copays did on my American insurance. Less than the copays. I get a real doctor, a clean private hospital, tests done the same week, and I can actually afford it. Remember the pork chops and the heart pills? Down here I don't have to choose. I take my medicine and I eat my supper, both, every day. And if that were the only thing Brazil gave me, it would already have been worth the whole trip. And I'll tell you when it got real. My second year, my blood pressure went haywire, and it was my neighbor, a widow named Fatima, who I'll tell you about, that got me to the hospital and sat with me and translated. A few $100s, good care, and nurses who treated me like a person. That same night, uninsured in Milwaukee would have been a bill that followed me to my grave. Now, because I'm an honest man, I've got to give you the warning too, the one that isn't about muggers. The most dangerous thing you can be down here is lonely, because lonely opens your wallet. There's a certain kind of person who can smell a lonely old foreigner with a pension, and they'll become your best friend. Fill up all that empty, and then, gentle and slow, there'll be an opportunity. A business, a sure thing, just needs a little of your capital. Wouldn't it be beautiful to do it together like family? I've watched good, careful men hand over everything to a warm story. And it nearly got me too in my first year, and I'm a suspicious Wisconsin machinist who measures everything twice. So don't you think for a second it can't get you. There was a friendly fella, spoke good English, took a real interest in me when I was at my lowest and loneliest. And after a few weeks, he had an opportunity. A little rental place, a sure thing. He just needed a partner to put in the capital, and we'd split the income like family. And I had the number half worked out in my head because I was lonely and I wanted to belong, and he was offering both at once. What saved me was Gord, that old Canadian, who set his beer down real slow when I mentioned it and said, "Ron, how long have you known this guy? A few weeks, and already he's family and a business partner in the same breath?" And he told me about the men he'd watched over 20 years hand their whole savings to a beautiful story that always, somehow, failed in a way that cost the gringo and nobody else. I didn't lose a dime, thank God. But I came closer than a careful man likes to admit, and that's exactly why I'm telling you. So the rules, and these are firm. You go slow, you never put money into something you can't run yourself, you never use the other fella's lawyer. You get your own, and you keep your savings out of reach of any story, no matter how sweet, for your first couple years. And on property, yes, a foreigner can legally own a place here, in his own name, free and clear. That part's real and good. But you buy it right. Clean title at the cartorio, checked by your own lawyer, your name on the deed, and you never let love or trust talk you into putting your money in somebody else's name. The kindness here is real, and so is the math. You've got to hold both at the same time, and the day you can, that's the day you're actually safe. Now let me tell you about Fatima, because a life isn't a spreadsheet, and she's the part of this that the numbers can't hold. She's a widow, 63, lives one floor down, does alterations and sells cakes out of her kitchen for the neighborhood. Quiet, sharp, kind, with a laugh she keeps mostly to herself until she trusts you. We started slow. She'd send up a slice of cake, I'd fix the wobbly leg on her sewing table, and it grew into the thing I didn't think I'd have again at my age. And here's how I knew she was the real thing. The one time a fast-talking fella came around my building with an opportunity. Fatima got wind of it and told me flat, in the little English she has and a lot of hand gestures, "Don't you give that man one real." She wasn't after my check. She was standing between it and the ones who were. That's how you tell a good one, down here or anywhere. The real ones guard what you've got. The wrong ones find reasons you should spend it. And I've got to say the thing everybody whispers about and nobody says plain. The older foreign men and the much younger women. You'll see it the day you land, and folks back home love to sneer. I won't, because life's complicated and only the two people in it ever really know. But I'll tell any man coming down here, the warmth and the attention you'll get here goes straight to a lonely man's head, especially one who felt invisible back home for 20 years. And brother, I was that invisible man. The age gap by itself doesn't make a thing wrong, but it means you'd better be the grown-up about the money and clear-eyed about what's real. Slow down. Meet the family. Watch how she treats her own people. The good ones respect a man who slows down. It's the ones pushing you to hurry and to spend that you watch. Part of why I trust Fatima is she's close to my own age. She's got her own little life and her own little money, and she has never once asked me for a thing. The asking, when it came from around her, never from her. Because that's the other thing nobody warns you about. Down here, you don't just meet a woman, you get adopted by a whole family, a big one. And that's where you've got to be wise. An American who says yes to everybody gets bled dry inside 2 years. One who says no to everybody ends up alone and resented. So, you decide your lines with your partner, together, early, and you hold them with kindness. Fatima and I help where it's honor to help, and we helped one of her grandkids stay in school, because school is the one thing that actually changes a family's luck here. But we don't bankroll schemes, and we're not an ATM for every cousin's emergency. And when we say no, we say it warm, and we say it together. She reads who truly needs help and who's just trying their luck, which a foreigner alone simply cannot do. That's the real gift of a good partner here. She keeps you from being either a sucker or a jerk. Let me tell you what a regular day looks like now, because I think it's what you really came to hear. I'm up early, before the heat, coffee strong. I walk down to the feira and the vendors know me, save me the good fish, tease me about my Portuguese, which is rough as a cob after all this time. But I try, and trying counts for more than getting it right down here. I've got my little routine, my bench, my bodicum on the corner where the beer comes in a little bottle wrapped to stay cold, and the old men argue about football for hours. I'm a Flamengo man now because Grajaú is. And when there's a big match, the whole city roars at once, and you know the score by the sound coming up off the streets. And I found something I didn't expect. A machinist's hands are useful anywhere, and I fix things now, up and down my street, sewing machines and fans and whatnot. And a man who's useful and kind is welcome in any country on earth, language or no. And Carnival and New Year's on the beach with everybody in white, and the fireworks over the water. A Milwaukee machinist wading into the Atlantic at midnight to jump the waves for luck. There is nothing in Wisconsin that ever made me feel that alive. Let me give you one evening so you can feel it and not just hear the numbers. New Year's, my first one down here, Fatima took me to the beach with what felt like the entire city, every last soul dressed head to toe in white, and at the stroke of midnight, the whole shoreline went up in fireworks and the crowd waded out into the ocean to jump 7 little waves for luck. A 68-year-old machinist from Milwaukee, up to his knees in the warm Atlantic at midnight, jumping waves like a boy, a good woman laughing beside him, and she told me to make a wish. And I'll be honest with you, standing in that water, I realized I hadn't let myself want anything in years. Wanting costs money, and I hadn't had any to spare, so somewhere along the line I just quit wanting to save myself the ache. And the wish I finally made was small, and it was this: let me stay. Please, just let me get to stay. Now, I promised you honesty, so here's the hard part straight. The heat never lets up, and it gets harder as you age, not easier. The bureaucracy will test your soul. The power goes out, the internet quits, the streets flood in the big rains, and you'll want a backup and a sense of humor. The safety means you never fully switch off, and that low hum of watchfulness is a real cost. And there's the saudade, a deep, aching kind of missing, no clean word for it in English. For your own country, your own language, the friends who knew you young, my daughter and the grandkids I only see on a screen. That one never fully goes away. You just learn to carry it. So who is this life for? Not the man running from his problems. They buy a ticket and fly down right next to you, just sweatier. Not the man who needs everything fast and efficient and his own way. He'll lose his mind in a month. But the man who can slow down, take people as they come, live simpler, and find his worth in something other than the number in his bank account, and Lord knows my number was never much. For that man, there's a richness down here that money can't buy back home at any price. The happy ones, the ones who last, they didn't come to be served. They came to belong. And this city can tell the difference about a week after you land. Here's where I come out after all of it. I spent 40 years measuring things to the 10,000th of an inch, and I thought I understood value, cost, price, what a thing is worth, and I had it wrong. Because the same $1,400 that made me a poor, shrinking, invisible man in America buys me a full, warm, connected, dignified life down here. And the difference isn't really the exchange rate. The difference is that back home we measure a life in what you can buy and keep and lock behind your own door. And down here they measure it in who shows up for you. We traded all that connection away in America for our privacy and our independence and our convenience, and we told ourselves it was a good deal. And some mornings on my little balcony with my coffee and the whole loud, warm tangle of this neighborhood coming to life around me, I am not so sure we got the better end of that bargain. Those pork chops I put back on the shelf in Milwaukee, I think about them more than you'd believe, because that was the day I thought my life was over. A poor old man doing quiet math in a cold store, and it turned out that was the day it started. I just couldn't read the blueprint yet. It took getting on a plane at 68 with 2 suitcases and more fear than sense to learn the one thing 40 years of precision work never taught me: that what a life costs and what a life is worth are 2 completely different measurements. I finally got them both figured, and I only wish I hadn't waited until I was 68 to run the numbers right. Dramatized story told in the style of the channel, for storytelling and entertainment.